All right, cool. I'll mute myself on the background.
Okay. All right, all good. Okay, it's top of the hour, so we'll let everybody in if we can. Don't think I can, Sam. I'm having trouble letting people into the room.
Oh, what happened?
I'm not sure.
Can you share your screen real quick? We're still
It
a
doesn't.
lot of people are still joining us. We're now at 15 participants.
Yeah, which is really great, but I don't know how to let them in. Because normally on Zoom, I have the option to let them in.
Oh, I see.
Can
Well,
you-
earlier, Angie, I joined as an attendee, and I was able to join without your, yeah, I can just join.
Okay, so nobody's joining, and I can't let them in either. So how?
Oh, there's someone is waving.
They're probably saying, "Let me in."
Wendy.
Okay, I best give a message just to say hello all. We're having trouble letting you in. Can anyone let people in? Does anyone have the option, given I don't?
Merge to meeting window. Let me see. What happens when you let people in, Angie?
You don't even have an option to let them in.
Oh, okay. We are now actually at 21. Yeah, we are now actually at 21. So people are just coming in and joining us.
Oh, okay. All right, we're all good, are we? Okay, cool.
We are.
Oh, thanks, Wendy. Okay, somebody's just put in the chat that she can see and hear us, but she can't talk. Okay, thanks for your patience, everybody. The problem was clearly me. You're all in the room. Great to see you all, and we shall get started. Thanks, Angela. Thanks for letting me know, people. That's really helpful. So I'll just share my screen. Okay, we can see my screen here. Yep, all good. Great. All right, then, let's get going. Okay, so the subject of our webinar today is how to develop your child's empathy and resilience, and why this is even important, why we're talking about it. So first of all, for many of us, our biggest wish is that our child or children will do well at school. And often top of our anxiety list is, will they make friends? Will they actually learn? Will they do well in that school environment? And it's very common for parents to worry like this because, of course, it's really important to us. And our greatest fear is often that our child will be bullied or will be unhappy in school. And it can be quite challenging for us as parents. So I'd just like to pose a question to you all. What's your greatest fear? Or if you've got children who are past school age, what was your greatest fear when they were starting school? I'm just going to give everyone a minute. My biggest fear is that my little one will become a bully. Yeah, there's two sides to that coin, isn't there? There's, will my child be bullied or will my child become a bully? And yeah, very understandable fear there. Any other fears that people might have, or worries? You know, if fear is too strong a word, that my child won't have any friends. Absolutely. Because we all know that if children feel good, if they feel well, they'll do well. So if your child is spending their whole day in school feeling anxious, feeling lonely, feeling like fearful that they're going to be bullied or they're not going to be liked, then they're not going to learn, because as we talked about in previous webinars, when we're in stress, we've got all those stress hormones going through our body, and that is a barrier to learning, because our body then becomes in a high state of anxiety, like fight or flight mode. And the last thing we're thinking about is what we need to learn or what we need to remember. We become more in a state of survival, and that's not a good learning state at all. So this is a very real fear for parents and children. And but the good news is that we can do a lot to help our children, even before they start school, or even whilst they're in school, to really ignite that inner hero in our children and set them up for success. So just thinking about success, though, we need to be aware of what success looks like. And it's not like what is important right now. It's what's important going forwards. What skills will our children need in the future? And, I've just noticed a comment from Wendy, and this is so true, Wendy. Wendy says that the school system generally doesn't recognise the importance of mental health. And that's so true. And we are more aware of it nowadays. It is more of the conversation, and I think we will see a lot change. However, it's not changing fast enough. So how do we as parents, how do we as educators really support our children to have the skills to cope in stressful situations, to cope with school, to cope with change, to build relationships, to make friends, etc., etc., and even to deal with people who may appear to be bullying them. So the future ready skills, and there's been a lot of work done on the World Forum, and in the education sector generally, talking about what skills do our children need for jobs or businesses or careers of the future. And long ago, many of these skills were considered soft skills. They was considered to be less important than the academic skills that we tend to, through traditional schooling, we tend to really push. And those skills are creativity, not just the arts, but creativity and creative thinking. Really important skills going forwards. Character education, and this is, when we're talking about mental health, we can't ignore character education, because that's about our values. It's about who am I? It's about how we behave and how we interact, building our character, building our resilience and our empathy, etc. Citizenship, not just locally, but globally too. Already, like, there could be people on this webinar from all over the world or watching the recording. We are now global citizens, and technology has supported that. So we need to be able to interact and engage with people from many different cultures, creeds, countries, languages, etc. Communication skills, really critical for future success. Collaboration, you can see all of this is about those so-called soft skills, working together with other people, being able to relate to people, and of course critical thinking and problem solving skills too. And the reason I'm talking about these is to discuss them in the context of why resilience and empathy is important, because all of these skills require empathy and resilience. All of them. Not one of them does not include the necessity for a person to be able to empathize or to have the resilience to bounce back and cope with adverse situations. So it's probably obvious when we look at character education, to build a good character and to be a good person in very simple terms, we need to have empathy. We need to be able to see things from somebody else's perspective and to be able to understand verbal and non-verbal communication. The same for being a global citizen, particularly if you're talking with, engaging with, working with people from different cultures and different backgrounds and different belief systems. You've definitely got to have the skill of empathy and resilience to be able to thrive in that environment. Of course, for communication too, for collaboration when you're working with other people. And resilience is a really important skill for learning, for critical thinking and problem solving, and so too is creativity. So all the skills our children need to do well in the future are supported by what we're talking about today, by the ability to empathize and for a child to have resilience. And if anyone has any, as we're going along, let's make this really engaging and interactive. As we go along, if anyone's got any comments like Marcia, Wendy, Angela, great. Thank you for your contribution. If you do have any comments or any thoughts or any questions, just post them in the chat because I can keep an eye on chat whilst I'm chatting.
We have hi Angie, we have a
Hi.
question from Kay Madsen. She said, will my child have friends in his class? Will he be liked? I guess this is one of her fears.
Yeah. And that's a very real fear, isn't it? Particularly if many children, and I don't know you or your child, I'm not saying this is your child, but it was certainly one of my children. Many children do struggle in social situations, and particularly preschoolers, because they're still developing the skill. And I bet every one of us knows adults who struggle in social situations too. So, and if your child is one of them, you're going to worry more about that than other people might worry about different things. All children, however, struggle on occasions in social situations and with, aspects of learning and development, and that's quite normal. So really what we're talking about today is how we can best support them from wherever they're at. And, as we all understand as educators, children develop and grow and learn at different rates. A child being more advanced in one area, in say reading or in construction or whatever it might be, it's not a sign of intelligence, not at all. It's just that, some children will take a leap forward in one aspect of the development and then slow down in others. So it kind of goes like this and we all get there in the end. So it can be a huge stress for parents if you yourself or other people compare your children with others. Please don't do that, because we're all uniquely, perfectly imperfect individuals, and we all learn and develop at different rates. So and it's the same for adults as well as children. But then let's get back to empathy and resilience. How do we support them by growing these skill sets? So the most successful people are high in empathy and resilience. And, when we talk about the ability to relate to other people, the ability to empathize, to be caring, to understand body language, etc., you can understand why that would be the case. And with empathy, again, I've talked about this a little, is that we have the ability to read people and situations and generally do well building relationships in social situations. And some children do struggle with this, particularly children who might be autistic or on the spectrum. But the great thing is it can be taught. So, and it just takes skill. It takes practice, and we can teach it. And you'll have some strategies after today to help you with that. Resilient people, on the other hand, and we've all been this little boy here who's lost the game of chess and he's sulking, that's quite a normal emotion for any of us. But resilient people succeed because of their ability to overcome adversity, that should say. Sorry for the typo. We all have adversity in our lives, all of us. And it's not whether good things happen to us or bad things happen. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with how quickly we can recover from these situations and focus forwards positively. And if we look at resilience, we can also use words like grit, determination, stickability, all those words that show that we don't give up. We're failing forwards. So if we look at empathy, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. The great thing is we're born with the ability to empathize, and there's a whole load of research and neuroscience on how that is and what part of the brain does that, and it's all connected to the mirror neurons in the brain. So when you see a newborn baby, a newborn baby within hours will copy your facial expressions. And it's not that they understand the facial expressions necessarily, it's just the mirror neurons in the brain mirroring the expression that you are making to that child. And it's a magical thing to see. But that shows that the ability to empathize is innate. It's in all of us from birth. But it's really important to support the development of empathy, because empathy can be lost as well. So for children who don't experience empathy, who don't experience loving, caring relationships, then they're less likely to empathize and to be able to demonstrate that level of love, respect, and care for other people themselves. So it's important for building positive relationships with other people, but also with yourself. So empathy is important for creativity. You know, if you've got a positive relationship with yourself, then you're going to be more creative. You're going to be able, creativity means the ability to be creative. You have to take risks. You have to step outside of your comfort zone. And it takes an ability to put yourself outside of yourself sometimes. And that's a skill that's developed through empathy. It's also, as we talked about before, having high empathy means that you're more likely to be able to collaborate and work well with others. And I think the reasons are obvious, aren't they? I mean, I'm sure people can understand that, you know, if you're working with other people, to be able to understand them and what their facial expressions are telling you, or to understand how they feel and to understand where they're coming from. It's pretty obvious it'd be an empathetic skill. Emotional connection, of course, the ability to connect with people emotionally. Important not just for the world of work and for education, but important for life skills and life happiness. Feelings of safety and security and well-being are supported by empathy, and the ability to negotiate. You've really got the upper hand in any negotiation if you can read people and if you can understand their motivations. And then also through all of that, we can build confidence as well. So you can see this so-called soft skill of empathy, or being, you know, there's many negative words put towards people who are high in empathy. You know, you'll hear things like, oh, you're too sensitive, or, you know, why do you care too much, or just get over it. Well, actually, we should be developing the skill of sensitivity and empathy and valuing it, because it's really important. And then if we look at resilience, what's resilience? Well, it's the ability to overcome adversity in ways that promote well-being. So it's okay if we're having a bad day. It's okay if things are going wrong to maybe wallow in it for a while and feel sorry for ourselves for a little bit. But the quicker we recover from that, and the quicker we can move on, the more happy we'll be, the more optimistic we'll be, the more, I'm sorry. Oh, that's weird, I can't go back. Now you're getting a fast track through the presentation. So people who are resilient tend to have really good self-control. They tend to have lots of social support, because you can imagine optimistic people, positive people are very easy to be around. They have the ability to solve problems. You know, to solve a problem, the first thing is to recognize it exists, but then we need to step above that and to be able to look at it from a different level. You can't really do that if you're wallowing in self-pity and if you're still kind of down on the floor and feeling a bit depressed or whatever it might be. So resilient people tend to have a high level of emotional awareness. And through all of this, they have self-belief as well. If you think about it, if you're optimistic and you've got lots of self-control and you're really positive and solution focused, you can see how one feeds the other, and it would very quickly build your confidence and your belief in your own abilities. And of course, we all know how important it is to be able to laugh at yourself sometimes, because we're all going to get things wrong. We're all going to always make mistakes. If we're not making mistakes, we're not trying hard enough. So, you know, sometimes having a sense of humor and being able to laugh at yourself is a really good thing. And it tends to be people who are high in resilience that can do that. So, you know, failure is an important part of your growth and in developing resilience. And it's also an important part of learning. And we can talk about that, because fail, F-A-I-L, is first attempt in learning. So again, if we're not making mistakes, if we're not failing sometimes, then we're simply not learning, because we learn more from our mistakes than from our successes. So there's no learning without failure from time to time. And this, I think we talked about this on a previous webinar, but learning is an emotional journey. You can't separate learning from the emotion. And most of you, particularly any of you that have done your level 3, your level 4, or done any study in the past, for you, those of you who are qualified teachers and educators, will have all suffered or experienced, depending on how you felt about it, experienced times of frustration, but equally times of achievement, times of stress, and times that we've really had fun with our learning and felt that we've achieved something. We've all achieved that, fear that we might not pass the exam, or fear we might get things wrong, or we don't want to look stupid when we're delivering a webinar, for example. And the relief when you do a job and you do it well and it's all over and you get that surge of positive emotion, and you could almost do it all again because it's gone so well. We don't experience those emotions unless we take risks, and taking risks is about taking risks with our learning, with our relationships, and in life in general, putting ourselves outside of our comfort zone and taking that journey towards the unknown. And that takes resilience. Does anyone have any questions? You like that saying? Thanks, Marcia. Which saying was that, I wonder? Put it in chat. Has anyone got any insights so far about the role of empathy and resilience? Please do post in chat if you have, because I love to be part of the conversation. So very interested in what you're thinking. And of course, if you have any questions. So let's look at how we teach resilience. How might that be, do you think? When we've looked at some of the skills and some of the attributes, how might we teach it? Well, I did touch on, if when we model that it's okay to make mistakes, but just don't give up. So think about in your home-based education environment, in your childcare centre, in your home, or with your children, how are you modelling that it's okay to make mistakes? And a good way is to just admit that you've made a mistake. And mistakes take many forms. So our fail is the first attempt in learning. Yeah, that really is a good quote, isn't it? So if you make a mistake, say you I don't know, you break something, or you lose something, or you forget something, then there's nothing wrong with sharing that. In fact, it's a good thing to share that. Oh, well, I've made a mistake today. I did this, or this happened, and demonstrate that you have the resilience that, but it's all okay. I dropped that cup and broke it, but it's okay. Nobody got hurt. We can pick it up. So it's really good that, mistakes are your best teacher. So it's really, really good that we model it and highlight it, so people can actually see that that's a way of life. It's a way of living, that we're always going to make mistakes, and making mistakes is okay. And there's a great quote by Nelson Mandela here, is it's do not judge me by my successes, because success does sometimes come easy. Judge me by how many times I fell down and then got back up again. That's the hard part, and that's what takes resilience. Yeah. So we build resilience when we encourage our children to step outside their comfort zone. So just think about that, when we're in social situations, we don't want to force our children into a situation where we might make them feel unsafe or really uncomfortable, but we can encourage them to take the lead in social situations. We can encourage them to give something a try. Also, we can stop discouraging them. So there's two sides to that coin, isn't there? There are ways that we can encourage them to try new things, try new sports, have a go. But there are ways we can discourage them as well. If you've got a child who's particularly courageous and, you know, naturally resilient, you don't want to dull that. You don't want to kill that within the child by being discouraging, by saying, you know, being a helicopter parent or a helicopter educator, constantly telling them to be careful, constantly telling them not to do something because they might get hurt, they might get dirty, or whatever that might be. It's really, there's two sides. You know, one side we want to encourage them, and the other side we don't want to discourage them either. And Wendy, you make a great comment there. We need to talk to them about resilience. Yes, give it a name. Tell them that, you know, if children are being courageous, you know, tell them that they're being courageous so they understand what that word means. You know, tell them that, you know, when they've attempted to ride their bike and fallen off about 4 times and they finally succeed on the 5th attempt, you know, that's resilience in action, isn't it? Highlight that and let them see that it's a value and that it's a skill that they can further develop. It's a really good point there, Wendy. And yes, as Karen says, that there are many, many teachable moments to model to children that it's okay to make mistakes. Just don't give up. Let's try again. And, you know, when you're talking to them, use that language. It's okay. Shall we try again? You know, giving up is a choice. So therefore, failing very often is a choice as well. And the sooner we can teach our children this, the more successful they're likely to be. So, you know, when we think about the daily obstacles in the park, in your learning environments, the opportunities that you can offer children to take risks and to do things. Sometimes some children are naturally reserved and naturally more cautious, and that's okay because that too is a skill. But if your child is naturally more cautious, then the best thing to do is allow them in their own time and their own place to give it a go. And sometimes that means the best way to encourage your child is to not be there watching them and kind of leave them to do it. And they might give it a go on their own. But you know your children, you know the children in your care really well. So you know what works for what child and how. So you would understand how best to encourage them or how not to discourage them. The flip side of that same coin. So when we teach self-control and self-regulation, that builds resilience too. You know, and have a think, if anyone can think of any examples where we teach self-control or where we teach self-regulation, what might they be? It'd be great to see some examples in chat. Wendy, that's a really good question. Do you have any tips with dealing with helicopter parents? Yeah, that's an interesting one because helicopter parents don't mean to be helicopter parents, do they? We all know this. It's often out of fear. So sometimes parents have had traumatic experiences in their lives, either from their own childhood or as parents themselves, that may make them more likely to be helicopter parents. So I think it's basically talking to the parents. You know, I think Wendy, you put in here before, you know, to talk about resilience, to name it. It could be that you actually talk to the parents about the value of allowing children to try by themselves and the value of allowing children to take risks. And that might help the parent then, if they see that actually this is really valuable for my child and their learning, it might support the parent to have a little bit more self-control themselves and not to leap up every time something's going to happen. Abby says sitting alongside them while they struggle to do something, providing emotional and physical support, letting them know they are safe and supported while being able to work it out for themselves. That's so perfect, Abby. Absolutely true. And Sam says, I teach my son to take deep breaths when he's feeling angry or frustrated. Yeah, that's a really good way too. Because if we can slow our breathing, it fools our body into believing that we're not in a stressful situation. Jodie, taking one chocolate out of many. That takes a lot of self-control. Yeah, and then talking later, yeah, once children have calmed down, that's the best time sometimes to have a conversation about that experience for them. Absolutely, some great examples about teaching self-control, um, when we're talking about one chocolate, before, it could be like delayed gratification as a form of self-control, isn't it? I want all the chocolates now, and I want all the chocolates and I want them all now. Well, to teach children to save them till later is teaching them self-control. So that's one example, good example there, thank you. And also self-regulation. How many opportunities do we give our children to regulate their food intake, water intake, physical exercise, regulate their emotions? There are so many moments throughout the day where we can support our children to actually take control of their life or their emotions, giving them choices. And all of this links to, we talked about this on our behaviour guidance webinars as well. Many of these link to behaviour guidance strategies too, because if you can imagine, if you've got high empathy for yourself and high empathy for others, then you're going to more easily master acceptable behaviours, more pro-social behaviours. Yeah, and there's great conversation here in the chat about teaching children to regulate their emotion, and the ability to recognise when they're feeling angry or frustrated, etc. So really, really great to see these conversations in chat. Keep them coming. Yeah, another way to teach resilience is, again, I love this photograph of the chess players and the little boy who's sulking, and the other boy who really wants to shout from the rooftops that he won the game. Life is not always fair. So we make a mistake sometimes if we try and teach our children that actually everything's fair, we all get a turn, we all have the same chance. It's actually not mirroring real life. Sometimes life isn't fair. Sometimes other people will have something that we want and we can't have. Sometimes you'll have something that, another child might want. So it's really important that we teach our children this. Yeah, we might not go around telling them life's not fair, so get on with it. Not in that way at all. But the reality is that sometimes life is not fair. So children need to understand that they're not born entitled to everything just because other people have got it. Some adults need to understand that too. So, to teach this through playing board games, sometimes they're the winners and sometimes they're the losers, and that's just the way it is. But it's the resilience that will help this little boy in the blue t-shirt here to bounce back and recover and go on to play the game again. What we'd hope is that he doesn't feel so bad about himself that he never plays the game of chess anymore, because that would be a terrible thing, wouldn't it? No more opportunities to enjoy playing that game with his friend. Well, if you think that can mirror our professional life, our personal life, and our business life too. So it's, if we teach resilience and we teach, well, yeah, okay, well, you lost this game, what did you learn from it? Or, have empathy. Well, I know you're feeling sad, or I know you're upset that you didn't win. Would you like a hug to help you feel better? What are you going to do next? Are you going to play again? Because next time you might win. So it's it's really, this is how, you can see through this conversation, when we're talking about resilience, we can't help but talk about empathy. Similarly, when we talk about empathy, we can't help but talk about resilience. The two really do go together quite well, and both are really important. So again, how do you grow your child's ability to empathize? Type in here if you've got any ideas, anybody, how you might grow. I mean, here I've got model empathy, and there's this beautiful photograph shows that pretty clearly. So one way to teach empathy is to model it. How else might we teach empathy? Absolutely, giving a hug when other people are sad. And, you know, all of us working with preschool children, we'll see children do this. And when we do, it's such a beautiful moment, because you know that that child has got empathy, and that you know that that's going to support them in developing positive relationships. Abby says teaching them about their own feelings, name them. That's right. And we covered this on other webinars as well. Remember that whole phrase, name them to tame them. So engaging the higher brain by naming an emotion when we're in an emotion can help us recover from that emotion a bit quicker. Yes, pretending to cry, right? If your little one's just smacked you in the face, well, sometimes showing your child that you're upset that they've done that is the best way to teach it, because your children do have empathy, and you know, if your child has empathy, he's going to realize that he's upset you, and he's more likely to not behave that way again. Talk about feelings and say, look, so and so. Yeah, that's right. Talking about feelings is really important. Yeah, again, Wendy says, I liked your question about, so what are you going to do about it? Yeah, knowing, well, you're quite right, Wendy. Encouraging children to choose what they do, and, you know, letting them know that they have a choice. Knowing you have a choice is very, very empowering. So even if they don't choose to make a choice, knowing they have a choice puts them in a whole different frame of mind. So it's so true. When they slap or hit, ask why. What would you like it done to you? Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, a lot of the time when children hit out, they're not thinking. It's just a reaction. It's an emotional response. But getting them to think about it afterwards is a really good thing to do. So another way is teaching children to recognize emotions. And we've talked about these cards before. You know, some children do struggle, and many children struggle sometimes as well. Some children struggle to identify emotions. So using these cards helps children to identify emotions, but it also provides emotional literacy. It gives children the names, like I think it was Wendy that was saying before, you know, naming the emotion, like I feel embarrassed, I feel sad, I feel surprised and angry. So we're giving them the actual words to be able to express the whole breadth of emotions that they might be feeling. If they can understand it for themselves and they can recognize it in other people, that's empathy. Role play scenarios, you know, this is a real fun game, or even having a role play area where children can work through emotions and situations, and also demonstrate empathy. You'll see it with dolls and with teddies. You know, they're giving them a hug, they're making them feel better, they're pretending to put their baby dolls to sleep. It all shows that the child has an understanding of empathy. But talking to children, what would you do if you saw someone fall over? You know, sadly, there are people who walk right past them, but, you know, it really would give you an insight as to where your child's at. What would you do if you saw somebody drop their food on the floor, or their lollies or sweets on the floor? Or, not always what would you do, you could ask, how would they feel? How would you feel? How would they feel? So we're bringing in all this language that teaches empathy. Asking them to imagine themselves in another person's situation is a really great way to do it. And it opens up such rich conversations as well. You know, if you're having these conversations with children, then they're going to be better equipped to deal with these situations when they go to school, because there will be times they'll see all of this happen, and they're more likely to recall the conversation and be aware of what they could do to help, or to help themselves. Looking after pets. I had to find a way of getting a picture of a puppy in this webinar. Looking after a pet is a fantastic way to teach empathy. It teaches, another typo, I'm sorry about that. Teaches the student that other living creatures have feelings and needs. And it supports children to think about other people and other living things outside of themselves. So it's you know, it's understanding that I have emotions, I can feel sad sometimes, and my puppy's crying and he feels sad. And so if they can relate to that feeling, then they can go and more easily meet the needs of the pet or their friend, whoever it might be. But that's one good reason to have pets, even if it's pet snails, as in the previous photograph. And we talked about this before, using literature, using short stories can help children think about emotions and motives of characters as well. So you might ask, how do you think they feel right now? Why do you think they feel that way? What might they be thinking? And how would you feel if you were in their shoes? There's some great prompts, and I'm sure you guys seem pretty onto it. I'm sure you could think of many others, but really good to use books, use storytelling to teach empathy. And teaching children that words matter. Again, I'm sure all of us know adults that do not really understand this. We can be very clumsy with words at times. And what's that saying? Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never. No, sticks and stones. Yeah, but words can never. I can't remember. There is a quote anyway, that a rhyme that teaches about how words can really have an impact on other people. So talk about what we say to other children, and when we say this, how that makes them feel. So, like, I feel sad if people say they don't want to play with me. To have a conversation about that is really, really good, because it gives children strategies of how to deal with that. Or I feel happy when people say they're my friend. So you can talk about why they feel happy and why they feel sad. And, you can then bring in that whole develop their ability to be a bit more resilient in those situations by role playing them, by saying, what would you do if, what could you do if? So it's a really good way to build both empathy and resilience. And, again, that whole name them to tame them emotion. Great book by Daniel Siegel called The Whole Brain Child. Really good book, great for behavior guidance, but also great for teaching empathy. I'd recommend it to everybody. So it's here down the bottom of the screen, Daniel Siegel, and it's called The Whole Brain Child. It's really, really good. So teaching children how to name their emotions. And in this image, you can see that she's simply drawn a happy face, a smiley face. And I, talking about what makes me feel happy, what makes me feel sad. But then as your child develops a more rich vocabulary around emotions, then you could add more complex emotions like frustration and anxiety and things like that into their vocabulary. Because the more vocabulary children have to express their emotions, the more they'll be able to express their emotions. So, and that's what we want for all of our children. So I think it'd be good to look at some common mistakes we make with our children that don't support empathy and resilience. And one big common mistake is victimizing the victim. So we can do this with the very best of intentions, where, let me think of an example, where you might have two children fighting over a toy. Or one child, say here's a scenario, and we see this a lot. One child has a toy and another child will come and snatch that toy off the child and walk off with it. Like, a well-meaning adult could look at that situation and go to the child who snatched the toy, particularly if they're preschoolers, and say, give it back, right? In many ways, we're victimizing the victim there. There'd be two questions in my mind. The child who had the toy taken off them, were they bothered? If not, then we don't need to involve the child that had the toy taken off them at all, because they're fine. They weren't bothered. They're not worried about it. They're focused on something else, or they just don't care. So we don't need to make a victim of that child and highlight the fact, that child who's had the toy taken off them is quite capable of dealing with that situation themselves. Or we as teachers can teach that child how to deal with that situation themselves. So you could ask, if they wanted the toy, you could say, okay, well, use your words, let's ask for it back, rather than go straight to the perpetrator and say, give that toy back. That's probably a good example. And there are many examples like that, and they'll be happening all the time in preschool settings. So very often we'll jump in and try and fix it, thinking we're teaching the children, we're teaching the perpetrator not to take the toy, and we're teaching the younger child that the toy shouldn't have been taken off them. But in a way, we're victimizing them because they're capable of dealing with that situation themselves. And if they're not capable of dealing with that situation themselves, the best thing we can do for the victim in that situation is to teach them. So rather than solve it for them, just say, right, shall we use our words? Let's ask Harry for that toy back, and then coach them through that situation. And it normally ends up, children are so good at negotiating if we don't try and rescue them too quickly. And that brings us to this slide. You know, very often we'll try and rescue children from a situation, a challenging situation, like the toy being snatched, because we do this because many of us do this because we're well-meaning, and because we're fearful that you want the child to be treated fairly is one, but remember, life's not fair. And also you don't want the situation to escalate, and you think that if we don't step in and sort this out, then it'll end up a big deal, when more often than not, us stepping in and sorting it out when they don't need us to necessarily makes it a big deal. And we're best to stand back and just see if the children can sort it themselves. And more often than not, they can, especially with a little bit of coaching from a supportive adult. Not allowing children to make mistakes or fail. I'm sure we all know of people, and maybe we've all done it ourselves at times, by allowing children to win because we know they're going to sulk if they're going to lose, or because we know they can't cope with the failure. Now, I'm not saying we go all out to beat our children and to win them at every game. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying, though, is teach them it's okay to fail sometimes. So they might not win every game. And success is measured not just by winning the game, but by participating in the game or the activity or the experience. So it's how we teach them to have the resilience to keep trying, but also how to measure how to measure success. So it's really just heightening our awareness about the impact we can have if we don't allow children to fail, don't allow them to lose games sometimes, for example, or to make mistakes. Sorry guys, it's because I've been doing so much talking. Forcing them to say sorry is another big mistake we make. Believing that if we say sorry, the child is doing something to put things right, when actually forcing children to say sorry when they don't mean it does not mean anything. They just think, if I say sorry, I'm off the hook, because that's the end of the story. You know, I've said sorry, it's all over now. When actually the best thing to do is to give the child responsibility. Ask them what they can do to help the other child feel better, or the other person feel better. Ask them to think about their actions and how that other person might be feeling, and then how they can help them to feel better. In that way, you're teaching the child that's done the harm, so to speak. You're teaching them empathy, but you're also modeling empathy, and you're teaching the child too that's been hurt that actually you matter. You know, it's not about saying sorry and you're off the hook. It's about, how can I help fix this? And you're modeling it 3 ways. So it's win-win-win. Saying sorry when you don't mean it just teaches us to say things we don't mean. And that's not what we want to be teaching our children. And it, like I said, it lets them off the hook. Whereas how can we make this feel better is a whole different thing. So it's really, I should have had a questions response before I go to this, but 2 things. I'd love any comments because we can discuss the topic of this webinar now if anyone's got any comments or questions. So I'm not saying it's all done. I'm just leaving it open to each of you if anybody's got any comments or questions. But also I do have a question for you. We get asked lots of times about different topics. And you know, we're thinking about what can we support you with? What can we offer you by way of a subject matter or topic for our future webinars? So if anybody has anything they'd like us to discuss in our future webinars, let us know, put it in chat here, because we'd love to know, because we want to add value and we want to support you with your children and in your educated tantrums, Faith. Okay, thanks, Faith. So low pain tolerance and tantrums. Is that your low pain tolerance, Charles? It's a good one. So we can definitely cover tantrums. Sam, I feel you. Yeah, it's so good. We have done a topic on tantrums before, but we can do another one. It's perfectly well. We can do it from a different perspective. So yes, we can do that, Faith, for sure. Tantrums are so common, particularly for preschool children, because you know they're learning about how to control their emotions, and emotions are such powerful feelings that it can be very overwhelming for children, and it's normally when they get overwhelmed that the tantrum happens. My Faith says my 2-year-old can fall over and be okay, but my 6-year-old screams straight away. Yeah, sometimes don't you wish you had earplugs? You could see that as a real great form of self-expression. Yeah, for some children, like you know, we're all very different, right? Some of us are more sensitive and more sensory than other children. So when we have a sensory experience, like we fall over and we hurt ourselves, it can be so much more distressing for children who are more sensory and more sensitive than it is for children who might be a lot more outgoing or boisterous, for example. So how to control anger? Yeah, resistant sleepers. Yeah, that's a hard one. I never mastered that with my children. You know, too, there is that interesting thing that, you know, there is a lot of research on sleep, and I'm by far not an expert on that. I think that might be something we might get a guest speaker for sometime in the future. I think that would be a good thing. To see if we can find a great speaker on sleep, a sleep expert. We talked about routines and rhythms and rituals. They help, but for some children they can be really resistant to sleep, and it, you know, although rhythms and rituals might help, and having a regular bath time, bedtime routine, it's not always the answer. I know, because I tried it. And you know, sometimes for your own mental health, not sweating the small stuff, and thinking about what bedtime routines you have or what bedtime you have, and maybe making it a bit later or adjusting your rhythms could be a good way. But I don't have the answers. I'm not an expert, but I do think it would be great to have somebody in and speaking for us on that topic for sure. Working with children's personalities, we could definitely do a webinar on that as well, and it would link to some of these questions and comments you're making here too. How to make children occupied with activities for a little longer. That's really challenging, because children will only, the best way to do that is to find something they're really, really interested. But if you've got them, if you're expecting children to participate in an activity you've set up, like their concentration span is so short when they're younger, sometimes you just can't do it. You can't force children to occupy themselves for longer periods of time. It's simply impossible. But finding something they love is a great way to do it. Yeah. Yeah, not binge. What Coco Melon? I don't know what that is. It must be a children's program, is it? Not binge watching children's programs. Yeah, the last thing you want is your children to spending too much time on passive TV and videos and things like that, because this is such, for the preschool children under 8, they are learning faster than any other time in their whole lives. They're learning at such an absolute accelerated rate, particularly under 3. So for all the time you have them on screen time or in front of a TV, you're limiting their learning. You're limiting their ability to explore the environment, and as a result explore their bodies, explore their emotions, and to really learn and grow as well-rounded human beings. So it might help us putting them in front of screens, but it's not doing anything for their development at all. Sorry if I'm guilt tripping any parents here. All things in moderation though, remember. So we're not saying no, never. Sam, guilty as charged. Yeah, all good things, you know, for short periods. We're not saying it's bad at all, but the TV should not be a babysitter. Yeah, thanks, Emily. It's very informative, she says, and she agrees completely about the influence of screen time. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just the screen time that's damaging, it's the lost opportunity for learning. That is the biggest thing. Yeah. Cool. Well, if nobody's got any questions, this has been great. It's been great to see so many comments in chat. I love to be able to engage with you and also to get your feedback. So we'll bear in mind your comments for our future webinars. And it's a case of watch this space, watch our Facebook page. If you're on our mailing list, we'll let you know when our next webinar is. And we'll also post on our Facebook page too. So thank you everybody for attending. It's been great. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time round. Thanks all, great to see you all. Bye. Oh, great. Well, Lorraine, let us know your ideas, please. Email us if you would. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Charlene. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Karen.
How was it, RNG?